Hi, welcome to Games on Board. Today I'm going to show you how to play this game, Dixit, and this game, Dixit Odyssey.
Let's start with the basic game. The inside of the box acts as a scoreboard since it brings this beautifully colored platform numbered from 1 to 30. Inside, we find a bag with 6 wooden bunnies in 6 different colors, and 6 packs of squared tokens in matching colors to those of the bunnies. These tokens are numbered from 1 to 6. The bunnies mark the player's scores on the scoreboard, and the tokens are used for the voting process. On one side, the tokens have a number, and on the other side, they are all the same. Each of the 84 cards that the game brings are totally different, and they are the game's main ingredient. The cards are gorgeous abstract paintings of the wildest and most absurd things you can imagine. Here, for example, we see a castaway. Here, a toad-faced woman sitting down with an open umbrella. Here, a man made of dry leaves trekking with a cane. Here, a candle playing an accordion for another candle that has just burnt away, etc. No one but yourself should see your cards. You can buy packs of additional 84 cards for about 20 euros. They look like this and bring totally different new cards. To prepare the game, each player chooses a color and picks up the corresponding tokens. On the screen we imagine it will be a 5-player game, so we discard the remaining player tokens, in this case the red ones. If you're 6 players, each player will need tokens 1 to 6. If you're 5, tokens 1 to 5, and you'll need to discard number 6. If you're 4 players, you'll need tokens 1 to 4, and you'll need to discard 5 and 6, and so on. Since we're preparing a 5-player game, each player discards token 6. Lastly, each player puts their bunny on the scoreboard on the starting square. Later, each player receives 6 shuffled cards face down. The objective of the game is to get as many points as possible before the deck of cards finishes. In a second, I'll explain how you get points. After the cards have been given out, the remaining cards are used to form the drawing deck. The game is divided into turns that take place in a clockwise fashion. In each turn, a player acts as a narrator or storyteller. This player chooses one of his or her 6 cards, whichever, and here comes the important part. The player says, sings, mumbles, whistles, hums, acts out, whatever he wants. The options are infinite. Something that has to do with the card chosen. It's really up to the narrator to decide if to describe the card or how this card makes him or her feel. What? For example, in this 5-player game, I'm the narrator and these are my 6 cards. Remember, you should never show anyone else the cards in your hand. I have the following cards. One with a man without reflection walking the stairway to heaven. Another one with a cat watching a honeymoon. Another one of a haunted forest. Another one of a kid going somewhere over the rainbow. A Red Bull addicted key. And the last one with a carriage on its way to the wall. If I decide to use the key card, I can go from very obvious to turgid. For example, I could say winged key or golden key or quite simply key. To make it more arty, I could say Harry Potter, since there's a scene in the first movie that is very similar to this. If I want to, I can even give a clue within a clue and say Aloha Mora, whoa, which is the charm that locks and unlocks doors. And I thought I was a muggle. I could also sing an Alicia Keys song, or hum it, or whistle it. I can truly do or say whatever I want. You can be extremely obvious or wickedly twisted. That depends on you and on how many times you got whacked on the head when you were young. The important thing is to find some middle ground, since that's the only way to get points. Once you give your clue, the other players will have to identify your card within theirs. If you make it virtually impossible to solve, or ridiculously easy, you won't get any points. Once the clue phase is finished, the narrator picks up his or her card and places it face down in the middle of the table. Now, the rest of the players have to search their hands for a card that best matches the description given by the narrator and give it to him face down. The narrator then shuffles all the cards received plus the described card and places them side by side, face up, in the middle of the table. All players, except for the narrator, have to identify the narrator's card by means of a blind vote. If you have an extra set of tokens available, like in our case with the red ones. You can use them to label the cards. If none are available, just say that starting from left to right, the cards will be 1 to 5, or whatever. If people get confused, use post-its or a piece of paper. Next up is the voting process. It's secret and requires the square tokens. Each player will use their tokens to vote the number of the card they believe is the narrator's. Imagine I'm the narrator and said winged key as my clue. Everyone would know that this is my card. By saying Harry Potter, however, it could have been any of these. This one with a girl crying inside a water droplet reminds me of Moaning Myrtle. This one of Hogwarts changing stairs. And this one of the Sorting Hat. So each player grabs one of his tokens and with its number indicates what card he or she believes belongs to the narrator, and then places it face down. Every player except for the narrator has to vote, and you can't vote for your own card. Once everyone has voted, the narrator reveals his or her card. He can do this by saying the number of the card, pointing at it with the finger, or using his token to create expectation. I like to ask the narrator to explain the clue given. Here I would therefore explain that in Harry Potter 1 there's a scene very similar to this one in which Harry Potter has to catch a flying key in midair. Next up is the scoring. The narrator should not give a very obvious clue, because if he does, everyone will guess correctly. If this happens, everyone except for the narrator gets 2 points. The same thing happens if the clue is very difficult, and players get so confused that none of them guess it correctly. For this reason, the narrator should find something in between, a clue that is neither too obvious nor confusing. So some players get it right and some get it wrong. When this happens, those players that get it right receive 3 points along with the narrator. Those that don't get 0 points. And whether everyone guesses wrong or some guess it correctly, the players that own cards that have been voted, that is, the players that have tricked other players into thinking their card was the narrator's card, receive 1 point per vote, up to a maximum of 3. The points are squares the bunnies get to move forward. So in case 1, everyone votes card number 3, which is the narrator's card. Everyone guessed right, so they all get 2 points, except for the narrator, who gets 0 points. So the players move their bunnies 2 squares forward. In case number 2, no one guessed correctly, so the same thing happens. Everyone gets 2 points except for the narrator. However, there are 3 cards that have received votes. Card number 2, which belongs to Mr. Pink, gets 1 extra point. Mr. Yellow also gets a point, and Ms. Blue gets 2 extra points. So we give each player their 2 points. Then an extra 1 to Mr. Pink, 2 to Ms. Blue, and 1 to Mr. Yellow. In case number 3, at least 1 player guesses correctly. Here, Mr. Pink got it right, and not only that, the remaining 3 players voted his card. Even if there had been more players playing and the card had received more votes, the maximum amount of points a player can receive in this fashion is 3. So in this case, the narrator and Steve Buscemi, Mr. Pink, get 3 points. And then Mr. Pink gets an extra 3 points for the 3 votes received. When the round is finished, the tokens are returned to each player. The used cards are discarded into a pile, and each player draws 1 card from the deck to fill their hand up to 6 cards once again. Clockwise, the next player will act as the narrator. If at any point the drawing deck finishes, the game finishes. If you have a few expansions and therefore a bazillion cards, the game ends when a bunny crosses the finish line, square 30. At the beginning of the game, the first player to start is whoever is first to find a clue. When 3 players play, it's very easy to guess the narrator's card since there are only 3 cards to choose from and 1 is your own. The game lacks risk-taking and becomes very boring. To avoid this, there are a couple of changes. Once the narrator gives his clue, the other 2 players hand in not 1, but 2 cards. This way, there are 5 cards to choose from instead of 3. Players also start each round with 7 and not 6 cards in their hand. Dixit Odyssey is an expansion for Dixit that allows you to play with up to 12 players. It also brings a couple of alternative gameplays. The box brings this plastic tray with space enough for a couple of card expansions. However, if the cards are in plastic sleeves, they won't fit inside. I've divided my box into sections and it works quite well. Right away we can see that there are no squared tokens and the game board is different. The game board works for both the scoring and it also helps identify the cards, since it has numbered slots on its sides where the cards are placed. It also brings wooden bunnies, this time much smaller and in more colors. Instead of tokens, it brings voting boards. Just like in Dixit, the colors match the bunny colors. However, some of the colors are very similar and hard to tell apart. These 12 holes represent the 12 possible cards that would be in play if 12 players ever played. The game plays exactly the same if you play up to 6 players. The only difference is that you use these thumbtack-like things called voting tokens to identify the card you're voting. The color of the voting token is irrelevant. If 7 to 12 players play, then the voting and the scoring is done in a different way. Since there are more players, the probability of guessing correctly is lower. For this reason, the game lets you vote up to 2 different cards. You don't have to. As a matter of fact, if you're sure of the card you're voting, you can use 1 voting token. If you use 1 voting token and get it right, you get 4 points. If you use 2 voting tokens and get it right, you get 3 points. If everyone fails or guesses correctly, the same thing as in Dixit happens. Everyone except for the narrator gets 2 points. The scoring phase is usually very chaotic. As soon as the narrator identifies his or her card, pandemonium starts. Some people cry about life's unfairness, and a few scream while others indulge in some serious binge eating. For this reason, giving out points can be quite exasperating. The best thing to do is for someone, well, who are we kidding? We know it's going to be you, to be in charge of the scoring. Start by asking everyone to place their voting board on top of their card. Then check if everyone has gotten it wrong or gotten it right. If everyone fails, move all bunnies except for the narrators 2 squares forward. After that, start with the voting board and remove one of the thumbtacks and check clockwise the other player's votes. Remove thumbtacks under the same number and do a final count of the votes that number has received. I'll show you. I start on the right and see this player has voted card number 2. I remove the thumbtack and check all other voting cards and remove any thumbtacks under 2. At the end, I count the thumbtacks removed, find the owner of card number 2, Mr. Blue in this case, and move his bunny a square per vote up to a maximum of 3 squares. Repeat the process until there are no thumbtacks left. It might happen that a card receives 10 votes. Even then, that player will only get 3 extra points. If everyone guessed correctly, whether they used 1 or 2 thumbtacks, they get 2 points. Move all bunnies 2 squares forward, except for the narrators, and then remove the thumbtacks from the narrator's number. Then repeat the process I previously explained, where you remove a thumbtack from a voting board and count how many players have voted that card. In a case in which at least one player has guessed correctly, start by giving the narrator his 3 points. Then look at the voting boards that only used 1 thumbtack. If they voted correctly, remove it and move their bunny 4 squares. Now look at voting boards with 2 thumbtacks where 1 is voting the narrator's card. Move their bunny 3 squares and remove only that 1 thumbtack. Leave the other one. Lastly, repeat the process of the vote count for other player cards. If you liked the video, please subscribe to the channel and help us level up by clicking that like button. And that's it. Your move, let's play.